Sounds good.
I have 6:59.
Up with 23 people.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wait, so you're starting, Whitney, right?
You got it.
Okay, thank you.
We should
We
probably
got it.
start like 7:03. That's what I'm finding. Most people show up by 3 minutes after
Okay.
the time. That seems to be the magic number. I don't know why.
That sounds
But I
good.
think we should get started because we have so many of us to introduce.
Oh, you're
That's
right.
true. They'll come in as we're like talking about ourselves, and it'll be fine.
You know
They
what?
won't miss
I'll
anything
just keep
important.
I'll keep an eye on the waiting room. And while we do that,
Go team.
Awesome.
yay.
Any last thoughts?
No, I just wish that we had another hour. So now that I finished stuffing my face, we could actually catch up. I just want to hear everything about Robin's ear. I want to just hear Sissy tell me whatever she wants to tell me because I love everything she ever shares.
Same.
And I wanna get to know a little bit the rest of you. It's too bad we can't just have a cocktail and hang out. But fine, we'll do a Q&A instead or a panel.
We can
All right.
always schedule a post discussion.
Yeah.
A debrief.
Yeah.
Brief with
Love it.
cocktails involved. Or
Yes, thank you.
just, nice tea with honey. No honey
Beautiful.
for Sissy though, just tea with no sugar.
28 people in the waiting room. Should I let them in?
I think
Yeah.
so.
Great. Everyone's joining.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So good to be with you. Welcome. Everybody in?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. So glad to be with all of you this evening. Welcome to the community conversation for the brilliant film Wrestling Ghosts, the fourth film in our Transform Trauma with ACES Science film series. Thanks to all for being here for the discussion tonight. And just as we give folks another couple of moments or to arrive, we do just want to let you know a couple of things. And as I go through these quick couple of housekeeping points and as folks filter in, we would love to know where you're checking in from. So feel free to drop that in the chat as well, and I will go through the spiel. So the first thing we want to mention up front is that this event is being recorded, so it can be made available for folks to watch later on. Secondly, we would invite you to join us in turning our cameras on if you're comfortable doing so. In our experience, it can really help facilitate connection and engagement and a sense of community to see each other and to be with each other in this virtual space. Though I do want to say it is totally up to you how you choose to participate. We would only ask that in order to avoid any audio issues or glitches. Please keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And you're able to freely unmute yourselves and participate at any juncture. And just to let you know, this event officially ends at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but my fellow film festival organizing team members and I will be hanging back, knowing that these rich conversations have tended to go a bit long. So please know that you do not have to stay back late and that you may leave at any time that works for you and that we'll be around a little bit after. And finally, we want to provide you with some resources to take care of yourself should you feel that you could benefit from any additional support at all. And knowing that some topics we may discuss could be a little bit challenging, I will be dropping a self-care PDF into the chat in just a couple of moments, as well as some numbers to have handy if you find them useful. And with those details out of the way, let's get introduced to one another and dive into the conversation with our esteemed special guest and all of you who are with us tonight. I can kick us off. My name is Whitney Maris. I am representing the National Trauma Campaign tonight. And in my other life, I am a practicing trauma therapist at a private practice here in Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C. And I'm also a project manager with the Institute on Trauma and Trauma-Informed Care. So that is me. I am going to pass it to Erin Connolly, who will be co-hosting tonight. And I will get that self-care resource in the chat as soon as I mute myself.
Thanks, Whitney. I'm Erin Connolly. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, currently working as a school social worker and a private therapist. I am also a yoga teacher and been working in the field of trauma for about 20 plus years. I'm super excited to be co-hosting this with Whitney and also my colleagues and friends, Sissy and Robin. And I'm going to pass this over to Sissy next, and then we'll kind of go around.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sissy White. Sometimes I refer to myself as a trauma mama, and trauma and parenting is definitely what led me to this movement, because every unresolved issue I had definitely showed up in my parenting and my parenting struggles, as well as my parenting successes. I'm so happy to be here. I have worked at ACEs Connection for a good long time now, PACES Connection, and now I am an advocate and a writer, and thrilled to be here. And I'm going to pass it on to Robin Cogan.
Hi, everyone. I'm so really happy and thankful to be here with my amazing colleagues who we have spent the last year putting on these virtual film festivals. It's been one of the highlights, if there is such a thing, of COVID. It's looking forward to participating in these. So I am a school nurse. I am in Camden, New Jersey, and I also write a blog called The Relentless School Nurse. And I think I have some of my Rutgers students on here tonight. I also teach part-time at Rutgers. So welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you here. And we can't wait to get this conversation started about one of our most valued films this year.
Thanks, Robin. So I'm going to introduce Anna, and I'm going to, and then we'll kick it off. So Anna Joannis is a documentary maker dedicated to inspiring conscious action and systemic change through film. Her previous work includes Generation Meds, an exploration of our fears and misgivings about mental illness and medication, and Fresh, which celebrates the farmers, thinkers, and entrepreneurs who are reinventing our food system. Before dedicating herself to filmmaking, Anna was a lawyer. She founded Real Youth Incorporated, a video production program for youth coming out of detention and other underserved youth. Anna is the mother of 3 children, and with Wrestling Ghosts, she hopes to contribute to a shift toward a more compassionate world. Anna, we're so happy to have you here. I can't wait to dive into this discussion. So I'm just going to kind of turn it to you. And if you want to just share a little bit more, maybe we missed something or something you want to add, or just kind of how you came up that you wanted to do this film.
Thank you for having me today. It's great to be here, and I launched the movie a couple years ago. The first major screening, I was on a panel with Robin and Sissy in front of 4,000 nurses, right? School nurses. And it was really a blessing. And it was so good to meet Robin and Sissy and to start a friendship with them. How did I start the movie? Very much what Sissy said. I had a young child, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I started seeing, some power dynamic with my 1-year-old, and I didn't know what to do. I realized I didn't really have any experience. I was, 35, but I hadn't been around kids. I hadn't babysat as a younger person. I didn't have role models, and so I just because I didn't know what I was doing. So I asked a friend for some books, and one of them recommended me a few, including a very thin one, which I decided to start with, about kind of mindful parenting. And it's called Parenting from the Heart. And it's about nonviolent communication in parenting, but really it's about mindfulness. And it really turned the mirror around and said, it's not really about what you teach your kid. It's about what's going on in your head. What is a story that you're telling yourself? Why are you reacting to your kid the way you're reacting to yourself, to your kid? And it had an overall message of compassion and opening your heart to your child, and kind of a concept of democratic parenting, which is the idea that you're not powering over your child and you're not letting your child control situation, but you develop these quality of connection that are, kind of democratic. And I thought that was beautiful, and it was completely useless. I was like, yes, great concept. And now what do I do? My kid doesn't want to put her jacket on and it's cold outside. How is this helping me? Democratic parenting with my 1.5 years old, So I reached out to the author, and I ended up getting coaching online with her wife, who was a nonviolent communication coach. And I had all these aha moments during the coaching. And I felt like, well, clearly that shows how useless I am, that I have these really kind of simple but like that such simple things feel like such revelations to me. Like for instance, with the jacket, she, you know, her name is Kathy. She said, well, the strategy is to put the jacket on, but what are your needs? And I was just like, strategy? No, I need her to put her jacket on. She's like, no, that's a strategy. What are your needs? And I was like, well, I don't want her to get sick. She's like, okay, so what else can you do so that she doesn't get sick? And I was like, oh, well, I can wait until she's outside for a few seconds and she'll get cold enough. She'll put her jacket on, or I can bring a blanket and wrap her in the stroller, right? Suddenly there were other strategies. And I was just like, my mind was blown and I felt a little dumb, but still it was just like, oh, that's super interesting. And as the process evolved, it went less and less around my relationship with my child, but it started turning into my relationship with my husband at the time. And then as we kept moving forward, it went from couple therapy to like therapy. And I was like really listening to my inner voices and how I talk to myself, because, you know, it's hard to fake it with a child. And so I was really curious to know if this was just happening to me, or if others would have a similar process. And I'm a filmmaker, so I thought, oh, I'll just test it out, right? And so I put out, and this is a short and simple version. It took me, you know, a bunch of detour to get to that, but I decided basically to get 3 families paired up with 3 coaches, learning about democratic parenting, and to observe their process. And it turned out that they all had the same process. It went from focusing on learning skills to change your child, to, you know, having couple therapy, to figuring out, you know, kind of your internal childhood stuff. But after a year, it was clear that Kim was just this very, very amazing subject of it for a documentary. She was highly intelligent, she was charismatic, and she was willing to share completely honestly about her life, which was a very unusual combination. And so I decided to move forward only with her agreement. And we kept shooting. And basically together, as we were unpacking, we realized that we kept hitting the limits of just mindfulness, that there was something else going on. And that's when we discovered childhood trauma, and started understanding that beyond, you know, kind of skill building and mindfulness and compassion training, which are all beautiful things, there is something going on that, you know, at the nervous system level that needs to be addressed, and that it's very hard to have these deep, to parent the way you want to, or to be in the world the way you want to, without quite understanding and then addressing childhood trauma. That was a very long answer, and I should let you know I talk a lot and I take a long time to answer, and so you should interrupt me anytime I go on too long.
Not too long, a really rich and interesting story. I don't think I would ever have guessed that that was the process that you sort of went through, and that's how this story unfolded. That's really striking. And I wonder what you think is particularly important about the story that this turned into, to be telling this story right now.
Well, you know, there's always a part of me that's just like, I have to tell you because it feels a little uncomfortable, right? For me to be telling you, this is a really important story to tell. But well, for me, any story that shifts from blame and shame and punishment to compassion and understanding is a story that needs to be told. You know, I'm a filmmaker because I deeply believe that we are our stories. And I think as therapists, you know, social worker, you know that as human beings, we are our stories, right? Memories are, you know, we don't even know exactly what memories are, but they might not be reality, right? So to an extent, so, you know, we are the stories that we tell over and over about ourselves. But as a culture, as a world, right, we are the story. As humans, as sapiens, we are the stories that we tell ourselves. So we tell ourselves that we live in a democracy and that democracy works in that way. We tell ourselves that money has value, you know, and so we can exchange it. I mean, you know, everything that we do in society is because we have a story that holds it together. And the stories has been pretty toxic they've been, you know, there's been waves of stories that have been toxic. And, there's been also some beautiful stories within that. But I think that we can create new stories, and that the new stories can transform our society. And so, yeah, so I think any stories of compassion is necessary to be told, and there needs to be, and hope, stories of hope and possibility, because we live in a chronic state of doom and gloom because of the media, entertainment, the news entertainment industry, right? And then the other aspect of that is that, there is a lot of, forgive me for saying that maybe, but I feel like there's a lot of trauma porn. There's a lot of stuff that's about like looking at other people's misery and maybe getting your cry on and feeling like emotionally connected and feeling like you have compassion, or feeling maybe better, comparing and feeling better about your life. But there's not a lot of resources out there or movies out there that really make you look inward and make you really think about, the work that you might want to do, or the possibility of healing for yourself, and and really allows you to think about the ways that you might be hurt, especially in the caregiving industry, right? If you're a teacher, a nurse, a therapist, etc., there's a tendency to think that others suffer more and to overlook your suffering. So I think that to have a film that really provides space to take an inside look, breaks the dynamic of the separation, the us versus them, dynamic. Like a lot of movies tend to speak about ACEs or trauma as being a universal thing, but then they have images of, African American ghettos, and really traumatic images of what, or stories that are like really dramatic, which actually Kim's is as well. But that does not necessarily help, because I feel like compassion is built, or connection is best built when you don't think it's about, the other, when it comes first from having compassion for your own experience or your loved one experience, and then that flows outward, and allows you to really say we versus, oh man, these people, they really suffer, which I feel like we've done a lot of that, and it's actually probably, I think that it's mostly not working, and it's mostly actually probably perpetuating systems of power. I had a really great conversation with a class at Columbia University that was like social work and public health, and with mostly, actually, it was a public health program, but I was touching on a lot of different things with social work and psychology and stuff. And they asked me like, about, like, they had this question that got me going. It was so interesting. We started brainstorming about what does it mean for public health? And I think that's a really important question, right? Because it's great for us to do our work. And I think it's super important that we heal, because we heal the world when we heal ourselves. But what does it mean in professions, like especially public health profession? And I feel like there was a lot of like this attitude that going into neighborhood and coming as expert and telling people what they could do or should do, and really, really well-meaning intention, saying we're going to bring trauma-informed this and trauma-informed that, and we're going to support people in these neighborhoods, instead of really saying we're going to offer resources and we're going to listen and we're going to say, what do you think needs to be done? Like when you think about children's services, protective services, and all the really senseless things that are going on sometime. Like, and if you came to the community and you say, well, what do you think we need to do about these children in the neglect or the drug use or this or that, the community would come up with much better solutions, right? Very likely. So I think that I'm hoping that a movie like this one can start shifting this pattern of thinking as expert and them suffering people, and which is distancing, and start breaking that distance and really start relying more on. And I think people who have suffered a lot of trauma, they know that when you go to experts, mostly it's not a good experience, right? You go to doctors and you go to therapists and you get re-traumatized. So I think that knowing that, I feel like maybe my dog is destroying something in the background. Mayan? Yeah, he is. I'm gonna take 1 second to make sure my dog is not destroying something. Sorry.
Absolutely. I think I'd just like to lift up in the comments that Elizabeth mentioned, looking at the faces attending this event, we know it's us, and more descendants of colonizers need to come to terms with our own consciousness. And I think that's a really profound comment to really tie into what Anna is saying, because, you know, the fact of the matter is this paternalistic approach and this otherizing approach may be done, as Anna, you said, with the best of intentions, but it doesn't matter so much because it is still hurtful, and the hurt is the result of that paternalism and that control and not being able to view people as experts in their own lives and communities. And so the self-work, the humility, all of that's really important. And Anna, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that in the context of what we saw in the film, in the sense of that one way to really help others regulate themselves is to regulate ourselves. And I think there's some stigma too around the idea of putting yourself first in order to heal. And I just wonder if you don't mind making comment to that.
Actually, I would love Robin to step in for that too, because, I remember, working with school nurses and I, when I was reaching out to superintendents and principal, and one of them said, there's no adults in a room if there's no regulated adult in the room, right? So if you have a classroom and you have, a teacher, or you have an office, you have a nurse who's not regulated and who's responding from a trauma place, the kids are not going to have that safe space that they need for them to regulate. And Robin had a great story, and I'm just going to pass it over to you, Robin, because of noticing how as you were getting more trauma informed, it changed the way you were relating, you were working. And I know there was one specific story about a kid being kind of sick. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. So I like to share that a dysregulated adult cannot help a dysregulated child. A dysregulated adult can't help another dysregulated adult either. And I was at one of my schools that I had to cover for a school that I really wasn't so familiar with. We often do that in school nursing. And there was a child that I was, I had never been to this school before, but the child wasn't feeling well. So I called home, and when mom picked up the phone, she just absolutely really flipped out. I mean, yelling, screaming, cursing. And I heard her. I heard her frustration. I didn't take it personally, but this is after much trauma work and much on, from my own perspective of reading and understanding, looking at my own background. And I said to mom, I feel like I've asked you to do something really hard right now. And it completely, disarmed her, because I think she wasn't expecting that. I think she was expecting tremendous pushback from me. And she broke down and she said, I just started a brand new job. I have no sick days. I have no sick time. And, here I was in a school that wasn't mine. I was feeling really put out. I mean, I could give you a list of reasons why I could also be dysregulated. But when you understand the impact of trauma on other people, and most importantly on yourself, I could see her point through a trauma lens. And I said, it's okay, mom. I'll just stay here for the rest of the day. And that's what happened. I stayed at that school. I did what I needed to do. Mom was able to finish her day. And it was a big, for me, it was one of those moments of putting action behind what I had read so much about. I was like, I had an opportunity to put it into practice. And I do believe when you learn more about adverse childhood experiences, I think you do see the world through a different lens. So thank you for calling me in, Anna.
I'd love to jump in, and also, I know we're starting to get some comments in here. If anybody has any questions or other thoughts around this, Anna and Robin, you're talking about the regulation piece. As a therapist, and probably, oh good Lord, about 8 years ago, I trained under the Bruce Perry's neurosequential model of therapeutics, But the big takeaway for me were the 3 R's: the regulate, relate, reason. And my goal in being a school social worker is just teaching teachers, nurses, staff that very first R, which is regulate, regulate, regulate. Because we can't even get to the front part of the brain, which we're trying to do in academics. And it kind of leads into, us in this collective traumatic pandemic that's going to continue, especially when school starts in August, September, with a whole new world of experiences in kids showing up in different ways and new ways, and adults not necessarily knowing how to support that and just show up to be present when they're set on really just digging in on the academics. So I'm really glad that we're talking about the regulation piece, and we can't get to the relationship and the understanding piece until we regulate, and really that healing piece. So I think that's super important.
I just wanted to say one thing too. I think that brings us back to the film, because that's what Mom was seeking, right?
Yep.
She was seeking tools for self-regulation so that she could be in a space with her own kids. I think some of the most dramatic scenes for me as a school nurse, as a person, as a mom, was when she couldn't connect with her kids. She was so disconnected. And she, that was painful to watch, but watching her seeking help and putting herself in such a vulnerable place and allowing us this incredible access to what the therapies were and what it was doing for her was just, I've never seen anything like that, Anna. It really is. That film has stayed with me. I mean, I've watched it multiple times now over the years, but it's really, really stayed with me. So I just want to thank you for having this window into help, into breaking down stigmas around getting help for emotional support.
Go ahead, Cece.
I just wanted to say too, one of the things I liked about the film, I know it's one family story, but it's also, I think it's so honest that it shows, Natalie and I were emailing back and forth a little bit about the film, but how hard healing is, how slow healing is, how daily it has to be. And this was a family that had access to resources, and a lot of those are not covered by insurance. The things that work best for trauma often are not covered by insurance. And this is a family that was trying multiple types of healing, had done talk therapy, medication, alternative things, somatic based, was really working it together. And that the impact of trauma is deep and lasting, and healing is possible. But I just loved how, for me, it felt really realistic, because a lot of times in the trauma movement, when we talk about, we just need to change parents, and if parents parent better, it makes it sound like it could be quick. And I think parenting with ACEs and all the hope and change is like super hopeful and empowering. The generational change we can make for ourselves and for our kids is super hopeful, but it requires a lot of support, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of processing. And I liked that this showed that, even for a family that was relatively resourced compared to a lot of families, just to get us thinking how hard and important this work is. So I really appreciate it. And also it tells the story from the parent's perspective, not a therapist, not a child. Like, it's a story about parenting as well. And we don't hear that a lot either.
Right. And I think, what's interesting is that people often think that because, the end of the movie has all of these really powerful, transformative moments around tapping, that tapping is the therapy that works, but it's absolutely not the message for me. It's actually that, each one of us is going to try a bunch of different things. And also you might try them when you're not quite ready to benefit from it. And so it's just this journey with a lot of trying things and a lot of, getting some benefit and then getting disenchanted and taking a break and having something else happen, or some major life event that gets you remotivated, reprioritizing, your well-being. And some of them are hard life event, right? Like So yeah, I definitely think that it's important to have that realistic approach that, there is often, I don't think the new generation of trauma therapists, but a lot of therapists is like, there's one way, right? There's one way to heal, there's one way to do things, and there really isn't. And everybody has to find their own path. The other thing I was going to say that I just forgot. Oh, there's a resource thing. So yeah, on the one hand, healing is an incredible privilege, right? Like, the level of time and space and energy and resource that you need kind of means that you cannot be in survival mode. And in the US, a vast majority of people are in constant survival mode because we don't have healthcare, because we don't have family support laws, because we don't have jobs that pay minimum, living wages. And so to find space and time and energy and money to do this work is, it's asking a lot. On the other hand, I don't want, to have a perspective that's until we've dealt with the big systemic issues, the racism and patriarchy and kind of the capitalism model of things that leave us all in the dirt. That then there's no hope for healing. And I take a lot of, I find a lot of inspiration in what I see a lot of queer community of colors doing in their healing, a lot of really community-based support group, really just some really amazing model of community-centered transformative healing processes that are geared at people that are under-resourced, that are living under, chronic stress, that cannot shelter themselves from the chronic stress in order to do the healing, who have to somehow carve these spaces to do the healing. Anyways, I'm blabbing on because it's not, my area of expertise, but I think that there's something really really valuable there, and that we need to observe and listen and learn so that we can replicate, again, not as expert, but kind of share those processes.
There's a few questions in the chat. Is that okay? I wanted to go back to them. Let me see. There's quite a few.
I think it starts, Robin. The chain of great questions starts with, do we have an update on Kim and how she's doing now?
Everybody wants to know that. and I understand the curiosity. I like to step away from Kim, as at the end of the day, it's a fiction, right? A movie is always a fiction. It's always a filter. She's doing fine. She is, her kids are much bigger now. She had some major bouts of depression. She kind of, actually the best treatment she got, she kind of checked herself into a voluntary what is it called when you in person, like you're not coming in and out, I can't think of the word, treatment program that inpatient that used DBT, and then she kept going, like every time she needs it she goes back, and she goes only for the day, but she kind of like, it's free, and you check or you pay what you can and you check yourself in, and DBT has really, really, really helped her. And it makes sense because it's a method that, anyways, but anyways, so despite all of this stuff and all of this transformation, it wasn't yet actually the right, or maybe they were the right therapy to get her to DBT, and DBT has been helping a lot. But she'll say at screenings, when she would answer that question, people would ask her, she'll say, well, I'm still struggling, and it's going to be for the rest of my life. I think that the main thing is more, there is meaning. Like there is a sense, first of all, there is that sense that something is wrong with you, that start getting lifted with understanding trauma. And that's a huge one, right? So like, even though part of your brain might keep going back to like, what's wrong with me? I'm broken. What's wrong with me? I'm broken. There is now a part of you that can say, no, you're not. That's not what's going on here. And blah, blah, blah. So there's that's a major change. But also there's just an engagement with the process. So that goes up and down. But when you're in the up, when you're engaged with the process and you feel like you know, I see some benefit. I enjoy the process. I find meaning in it. I see some hope I see some benefit in my relationship, which she did see with her children, right? That this makes it worth it, even though you might not feel like you're a different person, which is what we all want, right? To feel like suddenly we're freed from all the suffering. But there's just a new filter in the way that you suffer. Does that make sense?
I think that absolutely makes sense to me. Thinking of sort of the stages of grief, there's someone named David Kessler who has expanded on meaning making. And what we've found is that that's also related to post-traumatic growth and some of those similar constructs of seeing things in a new light, being able to have that realistic sense of hope that can keep us grounded and moving forward, can be instrumental in healing and recovery. So glad you lifted that up.
Andrew Solomon, the writer of Noonday Demon and Far from the Tree, is a beautiful author. I talked to him. He has some nice TED Talks, really beautiful TED Talk. And I got to interview him for my, he was in my first documentary, and I got to interview him for my podcast. But he talks about meaning making. That's one of the things that he talk about. And that goes, you know, along, you know, that belief of not just mine, but the belief that, you know, we are the stories we tell ourselves. So if you're able to create a new story, a new narrative in which you are the hero and, you know, you overcome obstacles, that narratives can really carry you. I was thinking actually about Sissy, because Sissy, do you want to talk a bit about, like, journaling is free and it's one of the most proven beneficial method of healing, and you are a writer and a proponent of journaling. I was wondering if you'd talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can say I had done 12 years of evidence-based talk therapy before I became a parent, and it was still the hardest job I ever did with one child. It was still brought up everything. I had learned a lot of skills and a lot of tools, but one of the things that was helpful for me was expressive writing, but also in a community, because everybody's sharing. Everybody's prompted with the same questions, and a lot of the questions were around parenting, and the questions were like, dinner at my house was ... and you'd write for 20 minutes without picking up the pen, without censoring, and the James Pennebaker at University of Texas style of expressive writing, which does relieve symptoms of traumatic stress. And you do bring, you know, you're welcome to bring up anything. Sharing is completely optional, but everybody's sharing. And so you're in community. There's nothing that's off limits. There's nothing that's triggering. Like, there's no like separate table for talking about hard stuff. Like, everybody's welcome to talk about joys and sorrows. And that community building and making it safe to be able to share about what was hard in childhood, or what was hard in adulthood, and what was hard, you know, in parenting, created so much safety and room and space to feel like, to even begin to inquire, like, what do I need now in order to show up for myself or my kid? And that whole idea, for me, I could do it in writing, and that, you know, you can't love anyone else till you love yourself. Like, that never rang true for me, because I wasn't able to do that. If I had waited till that, I would have never had any relationships. But I could develop a relationship with myself in writing and begin to be like more of my adult self, have a nurturing inner voice. For me, that was a real shift. Like, that whole become the author of your story, where you're like, I'm not the things that were done to me. I'm the person with the pen. I'm the person telling the story. That changed everything, because I'm not spending all this energy suppressing and repressing and hiding and feeling shame or guilt or sorrow about whoever did what or didn't do what, which was how I always framed everything. Then I just got to share my story just like everybody else. And that simple connecting thing is often what we miss as trauma survivors. We often are robbed of that. We don't get that. We know other people aren't comfortable with what we've lived through. We sense people's discomfort. We may have our own discomfort with what we've lived through. So we're just robbed of that simple, authentically showing up as ourselves. So for me, in a writing group where we did it on the page and then just read and didn't have to engage and got to leave at the end of the night, got to go home when the class was over or the workshop, for me, that allowed me to have a relationship with myself that was not about just dodging and weaving and whack-a-mole hiding. It completely shifted being able to pay attention to myself. And I just didn't know how hard that was until I was in a community where I felt part of a community. And then I was like, oh, this is why people like community. But before that, I was mystified why it was so great, supposedly so great, because I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like I could be real or honest, or that there was really a safe place to talk about the things that were really bothering me. So for me, it was a liberation. But again, I think for some people, drumming can do that, or dancing can do that, or whatever the thing is that makes you regulate in a way that you connect to yourself, and then like gives you space to like open up to other people. For me, I'm not sure how that would have happened if I didn't have writing groups. So I'm so grateful. So thank you for asking. And sorry about my dog.
It's such a, oh,
Hello. Sorry, I'm Natalie, and I want to jump in. I'm from Paces Connection, and ask about connection, because Sissy just sort of led to this question that I asked in the chat. But at one point in the movie, Kim says, "I think it was really, really lonely." And on your website, and I want to just say, I really loved your website. All of the resources that you talk about and all of the ways, I mean, first, it's so compassionate, but also just really thorough in a way that I think so helpful. And I liked that you needed to go through all the steps to get to some of those great resources. But I would love for you to talk about the role of connection and lack thereof that played into Kim's trauma, but also her healing journey. Thank you. And I thought, I'm so glad to be here. So thank you.
Robin, did you have something you wanted to add before I jump in?
No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
No, you go.
Okay. Well, I think, yeah, that's a great question. I'm stopped at the beginning of every answer because I'm just like, why am I answering this shit? Right? Like, I don't, why is it being, I don't know more than anybody in this call. But I love Sissy's answer, what she said earlier, because there's so many nuggets that you could just start unpacking. Like, there's so many layers to that. Like the idea that, like when you're a child, you are powerless. You are literally powerless. And if your parents is a user or is depressed, there is powerlessness and hopelessness in seeing that parent suffer, right? There's so much, if you're there's so many ways in which toxic stress or abuse or neglect is experienced, is powerlessness in a child. So that moment of becoming, of realizing your agency, right? Whenever that happens, and it might have happened for Cece or for me or for someone else earlier on about other things, right? But that story might not have changed internally, but other places in our life, we took a lot of control. We got very good at it, and we're like all tight and controlled, and we're like, I can do this, and like I'm gonna control the shit out of my life so that I'm not as anxious and I'm not feeling powerless. And I speak French a lot, so I apologize for that. I'm sorry it's recorded. I didn't think about that. So sorry, my daughter just turned the TV on and it's loud. I hope you guys can hear it. Good. So I love that. I love the agency part, because it's really, right, that's a key thing, like realizing that now as adults we have agency. And then I love the part about, needing to do it within a group. So like one of the things that I think is really powerful about Wrestling Ghosts is that most of us go around thinking that we're the only one. I'm the only one who loses her shit with her kids the way I do. Like, I'm sure none of my friends do this because they're good parents. Like, I am so full of shame. The way I scream, the way I, fill in the blank, whatever it is you do, the way I binge, the way I cut, the way I am incapable of leaving my toxic job, the way I, whatever it is, I'm the only one. And then, if you're lucky enough to be in a group like that, you hear all these people saying all the things that they're doing. You're just like, oh shit, like, right, I'm not the only one. This is a little bit of the experience in Wrestling Ghosts, where you come in feeling ashamed and alone, and you come out feeling, like with less shame and less isolation. And isolation and shame, they're the enemy. They're really the source of most of our suffering, right? Because the other stuff, I think, can be manageable, right? Depending on what the other stuff is. But the shame of this and the isolation really keeps us from actually being able to, you know, break through patterns or feel relief or feel joy, right? So starting with the breaking of that, that's part of the connection, right? Like finding community, finding ways that, which is what, you know, talking about, like the community, the queer community of color that are doing this work as a work of radical liberation, right? Of from oppression, and doing it together, and doing this deep healing work, you know, as this work that they do together. It's really powerful, like shared experience and doing it together, because we are hurt in relationship. And so we need to heal in relationship. The other part that I think you mentioned, I don't know if it has to do with connection, but what I think can be very powerful, and, you know, what Robin mentioned, or I think maybe you just did, Natalie, about within the sequence of Wrestling Ghosts. Early on, you see Kim really wanting to connect with her kid, and she can't, right? She is, like, the scene that's so heartbreaking for me at the very beginning, when she you know, her little boy Gabriel is 3 years old, and he's doing the robot, and he's hiding, and he's trying to like play with her, and she's like, no, she's not playing. She's like, you're really loud today, right? And he just stops, and he stops playing. And he's 3, he's not going to remember this, you know. He's going to say, you know, why do I feel like I'm not lovable, you know? Because chronically, as a very young child, he was not getting the feedback of a parent that's just like, oh, I'm so happy to see you, Gabriel, come here, right? Like, he was not looked in that way. He was not held in that way. His parent was not experiencing joy in him. That is deeply traumatic. But is it Hollywood traumatic? Was he getting beat up? Was he not eating enough? Was his parents like on the floor, passed out from alcohol use, right? Like he can't share with somebody. He can't go to children of alcoholic parents and have that common experience with them, right? So I think understanding like the ways that trauma can be so subtle, you know, but it's around connection, right? It's attachment trauma. It's a lack of attunement trauma. So if trauma happens in connection, then healings happens in connection. And I think that's really hard for those of us who have attachment trauma, because, you know, we avoid community, we avoid relationship, even though we might really yearn for them, right? So, but again, recognizing that and finding these small opportunities to join things, you know, maybe in ways that aren't so threatening, right? Whether it's a dance community or a writing, creative writing. Anyways, I'm going on for too long.
You are not going on too long. This is wonderful. I've got people shaking their heads no, yes, like they're all agreement with us that this is really great. I'm just trying to go back into our chat and figure out what the next part is. There was another question.
You know what, there is one. Can I just read it really quickly from someone? Where did it go? It's a little bit long, but I'm going to read it. From Rebecca. I look a lot. I took a lot out of the documentary, and I'm writing a reflection on it. But I have a question about children's efforts and boundaries. After watching the documentary, I noticed the child doing a lot of things to make his mom happy with his actions, some of which being physical affection. This seems caring, but caregiving from that young level seems like it could be unhealthy at some point with a depressed parent. The other day, she's a school nurse, a student shared his lunch with me saying, I know you'll be hungry later, and even double checked that I ate it. I only had that child for the day, and he had no reason for this, but did share that he was lonely at home. It seems sweet, but maybe out of proportion. I think he was only 8, so I'm wondering, what can I learn from this experience?
So yeah, for sure. For me, you know, I recognize Aiden's behavior, you know, like trying so desperately to make his mom happy. It's the, you know, the parentification of children, of parents who have mental illness, who are, you know, it's, you know, and Kim knows, right? Like it sucks the air out of the room, that level of suffering. There's no space for anyone else. And the child again and it desperately wants to help their mom, and because mom is their safe, is the only, is the provider, right? So, you know, she needs to be okay, not only because you love her, but because you need her to be okay, to take care of you. Otherwise, you know, it's scary. And yeah, he's really trying hard, and it's problematic. And 1 second. Wait. So the other day, a student shared his lunch with me, saying, "I know you will be hungry later."
Right.
And can what is the rest of that? Oh, okay, I see. I only had that child for a day, but he did share that he was lonely at him.
Right. So she's asking, in other words, when is affection or imitating caregiving qualities healthy, and when is it unhealthy?
I mean, you know, I don't know, maybe one of the trained therapists or child developmental people can say that, but to me, you know, like I've heard many times teachers tell me, like, you know, kids at home, you know, should be safe enough that they're pain in the asses, right? They should give you a hard time, and they should be regulated enough that they can keep their stuff together at school, right? So that's kind of like, you know, healthy. Like when your kid starts walking around you in eggshell and trying to, you know, with their parents, that's problematic, or with a caregiving, you know, person in their life. So like even a teacher, when a child, you know, like shows really caring, loving behavior with another child, that's good, right? That child is compassionate, that child that learns to listen to another child, that's good. Even like with an adult, like if that's not their adult in their life, and they like say, oh, you know, like, I see you carrying groceries, like, let me help you. Those are good things. Those that don't seem to me like they're problematic. I think they're really problematic when it's towards a caregiver. And not, again, depending on the age, right? Like 14 or 15 or 17 is different. And at 8, I don't think an 8-year-old should really be doing a lot of empathetic thing towards an adult. That doesn't make sense to me.
There's some, the thing that pops in my head around, and Anna, you mentioned around the parentification of, you know, kids, and then they bring that into their daily environments, and then they start to people please, and, you know, the other F in the fight, flight, freeze is fawn, is to people please, you know, those kinds of things. So that's what kind of pops in my head, is just a, you know, a response to a stressful environment. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the big T traumatic. It could be little things here and there. And as it builds up with the stress, they want to ease the adults' either concerns or worries or stress themselves, so that they can make it a little bit easier. So going back to what Rebecca was saying about going into, you know, being offered lunch and they were trying to care for them, they become little mini caregivers. So,
right. And they might also be seeking help. Like if that's a child that feels lonely, they might be seeking to connect and to get support. I think one of the things that really kind of that I find really interesting, you know, when Kim says, you mentioned it earlier, Natalie, when Kim says in one of those later scenes that she was 9-year-old, she was in a shelter, her mom just had a baby, her mom was sick, a battered women's shelter, and she just was lonely. Kim often felt like people always wanted to talk to her about the, you know, I keep calling them the Hollywood traumatic stuff, you know? And for her, it's not necessarily the stuff that was, you know, the most impactful in terms of the way what she still holds on, you know, the most. And I think, you know, the fact that like what's left out of the situation is this little girl that has nobody to rely on, right? Nobody to turn to, nobody that sees her, that says, oh, Kim, that's a lot. Like, that's a lot that's going on. And I'm here. Like, let me hold you, right? Like, that's right. That why some kids do better than others. Like a kid can be having all of that, but then they have that person, right? They have the one person. So maybe a kid does that with a teacher because they're seeking that. They're seeking the person that be like, I see you. I see what's going on for you. And I'm going to hold you. I'm just going to like be that person for now.
That's so spot on. And I can, I'm sure Robin can share in that experience of, I get the phone calls when a kid is having, sometimes if they can't get a hold of the nurse, they'll call me and I'm like, okay, let's hold tight. We got to go. And then we go to the nurse to clear out all the biological, physical stuff and make sure that they're safe and that they're not physically sick. And then move on to the social, emotional, and mental well-being. And they do seek out, reasons to come down to the nurse's office or to the counselor or social worker's office. So spot on.
And I have to say, in this COVID, whatever transition we're making, first of all, COVID has been, I think, a collective trauma for all of us. There's a lot of grief across this country. There's a lot of grief in schools that we're seeing, I know for sure. And, we don't, prior to COVID, school nurses spent up to 35% of our time on mental health issues, period, let alone now and beyond COVID. And what I'm seeing in school is a lot of dysregulation from children and from adults. I think we have to look at the trauma that we've all been experiencing, the disconnection, the isolation, the stop and start, the mixed messages. I think all of those things underneath all of it, and this is why I really also loved your film, Anna, is that, the underlying thing that we need to thrive and flourish is a sense of safety. And when that is not reachable as a child, and then through your most developmental phases of growing up, it stays with you. And it's so easy to slip into not feeling safe. And I think I know for me, for many people that I know, this going through COVID has felt incredibly unsafe. And we're still in the midst of it, right? We have all these new rules in our community, but different rules at school. COVID's not happening in bars and restaurants and the gym and the sports arenas, but we're still needing to protect ourselves at school because it's still happening. So anyway, I got off on a tangent. I just find this really interesting. It all relates back, for me anyway. It feels like it relates back to safety. And what does that mean? How do we feel safe? How do we create safe spaces in this world?
I think that's really profound. Thanks for drawing that connection, Robin. And somehow it is 7:57 p.m. on the East Coast. This has been such a heart-opening and rich conversation. And I'm wondering if we could close out with I wonder, Anna, if you could make comment to what was the largest transformation that you experienced as a result of going through this process.
Sure. And also I'd love to hear a bit more from Sissy, because I've learned so much from her, and also from she always bring like a lens of understanding, again, those big societal forces, racism and poverty and patriarchy, and it's such an important part. And anyways, Sissy, if you don't mind, after I say a couple words, I would love for you to say a bit more about whatever you want to say, not necessarily what I just decided to make you say, right, by this question. Remember from the kind of workshop you were talking about with the parents, try not to influence, even if it's subtly influenced. So I'll try not to do that. It's too late. anyways, what transformation? I mean, I learned about trauma, you know, and I got to, I mean, that was mind-boggling to me, right? That I had never heard about the ACEs study before, that I'd never heard about the impact of trauma before. It was really, yeah, it was a major filter change, you know, in my life. And yeah, I don't know. I feel, interestingly, that I managed to go through the movie and through shitloads of therapy and processes without really ever truly making myself vulnerable, because I am that kid that's, you know, one of the common, that the kid that's the caretaker becomes the overachieving kid that needs to do it all. Like, you know, that's me. And so I feel like I needed to bite the dust really, really hard to kind of come to a place where I was like, I need to just, I just, you know, you need to be deeply humbled, I think, and then kind of say, you know, I have some, like, recognizing the way my attachment trauma or my trauma is affecting thing, just to really start doing this work from a way more vulnerable place, because I've been doing this work forever. I've always been in therapy for as long as I remember, right, on and off. But I feel like I always managed to do it like here somewhere, right? And even with the movie, and I did tapping with Victor, and I tried neurofeedback, and everything Kim was doing, I was doing first. So it took kind of, but I feel like so I think, I guess it's just peeling the layers. I feel like every time I think I've done the work or I'm doing the work, I'm like, oh, like I'm just scratching the surface, and, you know, I need to go there or there. Or so I feel like I'm actually really, feel like this year, the past 2 years were really hard, but also kind of trying to see a little bit of deeper changes happen. I can't tell you if it's going to happen, but I'm hoping I'm hoping it will. That was not a question answer that made any sense, but, you know, it's late, whatever.
It made perfect sense.
I was just going to jump in on and say what I loved about the film was, even as much healing as I've done, when I first am introduced to Kim in the film, you know, I'm kind of judgmental of her parenting. And the more I hear her story and the more context I get, I also move to compassion. And I appreciated that journey, and also seeing how quick it can be to judge, you know, how quick we are to judge other parents. So I liked seeing and feeling a shift in myself. And then the only other thing I would say is, I think because of having a collective trauma that we've all been through, Robin, like you were saying, I think for a lot of us that can sometimes regulate ourselves, we learned that if your job's not accommodating, or your childcare goes away, or your work demands change, it's really hard to regulate. And how much of what we also call trauma is also context, societal context, support or lack thereof, resources or lack thereof. So for a lot of people that have trauma survivors, there isn't a safe extended family who's helping with child care. And that, for a lot of people, the first time people experienced that was during COVID. But for a lot of trauma survivors, that's just how it is. It always is. And so I think, in a big, wider societal way, just the more context we all have for each other's stories and experiences, and your movie helped give me context to somebody that I didn't necessarily relate to when I started watching, but by the end I did. And so I really appreciated that. And also just that you're bringing up parenting, you know, the parenting side that I think we need to talk more about. So I'm very grateful to you for your film and your work.
Thank you. And I'm grateful for your work and your contribution. I was going to say, you know, when COVID hit at the very beginning, and everybody I would see in Facebook threads was like, oh my God, how am I going to survive? I'm not seeing anyone. And I just kept thinking my life hasn't changed at all. Like, what's wrong with me that like everybody is like feel like they've lost so much? And I was just like, no, like, I mean, a little bit of like, you know, talking to somebody at a pickup or something, but like, you know, it was funny what you just said. It's true. I think so much of it is context, and I do think people have experienced this, you know, for some for the first time, or, you know, hopefully have a little perspective about what others have to experience. Thank you, Sissy. And thank you, Robin, and thank you, Erin, and thank you, Natalie, and Whitney. Thank you for having me and for organizing this series and for doing so much work to raise awareness about childhood trauma.
What a gift, really. Thank you for this evening and all the engagement from the amazing people who joined us, really from all over the world. Somebody just said Sion Rose, they're from Scotland. I know our friend Liz from Canada is here. There are people from all over the country. And it has been really a joy to work on this project. I can't believe our year has concluded. We did 4 films over the year, and it's just been, like I said in the beginning, one of the few silver linings of COVID that we had this to look forward to. So thank you all for your participation. And I want to give a special shout out to my Rutgers school nursing students who I see are on this call. Yay! I hope you really enjoyed the film. And I'm really glad that you joined us. It really makes me proud. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. This, as Robin, I think Robin or Sissy wrote in the chat, this was recorded, so it will be available in the near future. And you know, just my thought is that this was almost the perfect film to wrap up with because of the focus on connection, compassion, and community. And that's what this group has really strived to bring to everybody based on the film. So Anna, thank you so much for all the inspiration and the knowledge and the awareness to all the different topics that included the most important pieces, which is the compassion piece.
Thank you.
So thank you, everyone.
Night, everybody.
Good night.
Oh, does Elizabeth have a question? Was she?
No?
Oh, no, she was just saying bye. Okay, bye, Elizabeth.
Great.
Maybe you can stop the recording.
Oh, good idea. And I'm going to save the chat as well.
Oh, good.